Okay, what is good, YouTube? Let's go over some premium content. So right now I'm going to be sharing with you something people don't tell you because people don't know it. It's something I know from a lot of time in the markets and analyzing things detailed. So there is something in the market called a breakaway gap, which is a fair value gap that does not get traded to. Now, this is a breakaway gap. Now, yes, it got traded to in the future, as you can tell, but in the short term, it didn't. If you want to find a better example of a breakaway gap, it'd be something like this. That is a breakaway gap. Okay, so in the short term, this was a breakaway gap, and this was just a normal breakaway gap. So, how do you know when a breakaway gap is going to get formed? Now, let's go over what a breakaway gap is. So, it's a fair value gap that doesn't get retraced into. A lot of times, it represents strong momentum in the direction that is getting traded. The fair value gap's getting made at. So a breakaway gap to the upside, you see a lot of bullish candles after, bullish candles after. Um, there's a breakaway gap right here. This is not a breakaway gap because it gets traded into. And yeah, so why these are good. They show you where the market's going, and if you can predict them, you can take good trades like mine today. So my trade today is a little fishy. This was my entry, but my stop loss, because I knew this was going to be a breakaway gap, was able to be really tight. This was my stop loss, and this was my entry, which means I can have a very high RR. So this was my trade. My take profit was up here. My fill was just dog. So my fill was bad. Take profit was up here though. It's like a 1 to 7. So let's take a look at how to spot the breakaway gaps. So how do you know if a breakaway gap's gonna be formed? You gotta find out where price is gonna retrace and reject from. You gotta find a point. So right here, I'm seeing this wick, and I was expecting this wick to get traded into, which it did, and reject. It's because of this fair value gap getting respected. The market was bullish, and then this wick was um, a place where I wanted to price to retrace and reject from. So once I see price get there, also has a short-term liquidity sweep. Once I see price get there, I want to see a breakaway gap or not a breakaway gap. How do I tell though? There's something called a volume imbalance. Now, this is between here and here. Okay, this is between the close of the previous candle and the open of the next one. If there's a gap, that's called a volume imbalance. So, or a liquidity void. So, this is this close and this is the open. You see that gap right there? Or shouldn't be a gap. So, because there is a gap that's called a liquidity void, a lot of times that represents volatility in the market. So, a lot of orders going boom, boom, boom. And that means a lot of times we have enough momentum to leave a breakaway gap. So whenever you see this candle close bullish, you can assume it's going to be a breakaway gap. So if I don't want the breakaway gap to get traded into, stop loss could be anywhere in it. So stop loss could be right there, the low of this candle. Okay, that's how you use breakaway gaps. Okay, now volume imbalance was there, breakaway gap got formed. Volume imbalance is here, breakaway gap got formed. Okay. That is how you tell. Now, a lot of times you're going to see volume imbalances without breakaway gaps, like here, for example, between the here and here. Okay, but that's just really, you're going to see it's not a breakaway gap instantly because there's no fair value gap in the first place. So that is how you tell if a breakaway gap is going to get formed. It works well. You see volume imbalance paired up with a breakaway gap. So that's how you tell. It is pretty simple. There's not much to it. You see no volume imbalance, you don't see a breakaway gap. There's not much to it. I like to keep things simple. And yeah, that is how you tell and how you spot if a breakaway gap is going to form.